Ready? With that, I'll call to order the Business and Governance Committee meeting for Thursday, July 9th, 2015. And we begin with non-agenda public comment.
We have no public comment.
Let's move on to new business. The first 6 items on our calendar are all being presented by Elaine Reagan. So let's start with the first one, which is staff recommendation to adopt revised conflict of interest policy.
Thank you. So you have the staff report in front of you. The recommendation is to adopt the revised policy, which the only proposed revision made by staff is to add to the scope of the policy coverage for independent, non-trustee members of the audit and investment committees. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Seems like a reasonable change, and I will move that change. Oh, Alan has moved the change, and Dick has seconded it.
Ready to vote?
And it passes 6-0. Next.
The next item is the staff's recommendation to adopt the revised ethical conduct, compliance, and training policy. This deals with this is also a recommendation to add to the scope of the policy the independent members of the investment and audit committees, and a requirement that they file a Form 700. With regards to the audit committee members, this really came to our attention because of the fact that we've added independent members of the investment committee who by law are required to file Form 700s because they participate in public investments. But we did some research, and I've worked with Fiduciary Council. The audit committee has been in existence for going on 10 years now. I think it was formed in late 2005. And when it was initially formed, the decision was consciously made not to have them file Form 700. But there's an Attorney General opinion out there that talks about the fact that once a committee has been in existence for a sufficient period of time, that it is shown that the committee makes recommendations to a full board like this that are routinely adopted without change, then the committee becomes a committee that is actually participating in making a government decision. We went back and looked at some of the agendas for the audit committee over the years, and we felt like we had reached that point in time where the audit committee was making routinely recommendations to the board that are adopted without change. So Fiduciary Council and I both agree that it's time to have independent members of the audit committee file a Form 700. We will amend, if this is adopted by the board, we will amend the SDCERS Conflict of Interest Code to add independent members of the audit committee and designate them as what's called local filers. They won't have as high of a disclosure requirement as full trustees do. It will be narrowly tailored to what is necessary to ensure that they don't have a conflict of interest, and so it won't be an onerous burden. Mark and I have talked with all of the independent audit committee members, and they don't have a problem with this. So with that, we recommend that the board adopt the revisions.
All right. Any questions? Let's go to a vote. Go to a motion. The motion's been made by Ed Katroser, seconded by Tom Sullivan.
Ready to vote? All votes are in.
Motion passes 6-0. Item 3.
And again, this is just another housekeeping matter to add to the fraud and criminal acts policy coverage for the independent members of the audit and investment committees for the same reasons discussed previously.
Any questions? Okay, I've moved this. Natasha Kalura has provided the second.
Ready to vote?
Are we missing a vote?
You got it.
All right, there we are.
All votes are in.
Motion carries 6-0. 4.
This is staff's recommendation to approve issuance of an RFP for Investment Counsel. You have in front of you the draft RFP. It has been 3 years since we last issued an RFP for Investment Counsel, and we just thought we would now bring it to the board to go through the process once again.
Anyone have any questions about this one? Nope. We have a motion from Richard Wilkin, second from Tom Sullivan.
Ready to vote? All votes are in.
Motion passes 6-0. Item 5.
Staff's recommendation to adopt the revised education policy. We are recommending that the policy be revised to include a requirement that each trustee sit down with the general counsel and develop an individual plan that it would be suited to that particular trustee's needs. That plan would then come before the board for adoption instead of having to piecemeal ask for training at each board meeting. It also provides an opportunity for trustees to ask for additional training throughout the year if they so desire, if something comes up that wasn't considered when their individual plan was presented and adopted by the board.
Does it allow board members discretion to request additional training, or does it require them to meet any particular standard in order to be able to have that request approved?
We've left it pretty open that, it's pretty flexible that they can just request it and the board can consider it.
Right.
So, Elaine, in meetings with you, you would sit down and say, okay, you haven't had fiduciary training for 3 years, so I recommend you do that. That could sort of be more of a macro basis. Right.
The thought, and I was actually talking to Tom about this just prior to the meeting, the thought would be that I would go through for each trustee, each current trustee, develop a file. What training have you already taken? And then sit down with you and talk about what do you think your weak points are? What would you like to do? Those kinds of things.
And then would you do anything on the back end, like evaluate the training they took? So going forward, we'd know, okay, this is valuable, this is not.
Right, and that's another thing. We realized that we hadn't really been receiving the evaluation forms from trustees after they went to training. So that would be another thing that I could kind of follow up on that, track it. And if, for example, Tom went to a conference and said, this really was worthless, I could pass that on to other trustees.
And then we'd know we should go to that conference.
Just a couple other things for the committee's benefit. There was a recent law change that affected the 37 Act county pension systems where they are now required to do a certain amount of ongoing CPE each year. It does not it's not something that we are subject to. We have discussed with the board sometime in the last year whether you all would want to establish some kind of base threshold of so many hours of CPE. At that time, you all said, no, we don't really think we need to have a policy. We'll just monitor it. So we're not recommending that we put in a policy of minimum CPE either. And then, in addition to what Elaine said, obviously this level of one-on-one meeting with Elaine would certainly be helpful to brand new trustees who often come in, drinking out of a fire hose saying, boy, what do I need to do here? And this is some good help to them in their initial year or two about what training would be good and which ones before others and that type of thing.
What is their requirement?
I believe it's like 20 hours of years. Does that sound about right?
That might be a bit high. I don't think it's 20, but it might be 10, a little more than 10.
Right.
Yeah.
I support some degree of a policy that we should receive training every year, and mostly for the electeds. And it's not really been a challenge for me, but I know for some of the electeds, getting time off work, getting away from work, from the city, being released from their city job to come to the board, committee, or go to training can sometimes be challenging. I've actually had to have those conversations over there about, well, the trustees need to get the training. They need to go train. They're administering a $7 million trust fund. It's a good idea that they be trained.
Right.
And so usually those discussions result in the city saying, well, okay, that's a good idea, but sometimes there's some challenges in getting released from work.
Yeah. Elaine and I have occasionally spoken with a new trustee's supervisor to reassure them on why this makes sense and why it's required and that type of stuff too. So we've tried to step in to support the new board members. I know with Jeff and Jimmy when they came in, I think Jeff might have had some questions, and it makes sense for us to kind of step in and intervene.
I think the way we do it now is effective. So I'm not proposing we make a change, but it's just one of the challenges that we have as elected.
I generally think it's a good idea to do this in a more comprehensive fashion and to have planning go on up front. I wouldn't want to see the plan become a straitjacket because people's schedules change and
Right.
ideas about what they need may change, but I think it's a great idea to have it up front. So I'd support this. If there are no other questions or comments, we're ready. I've made a motion to approve this. Ed Katrosser has seconded it.
Ready to vote?
And
Vote
car-
to end.
It passes 6-0. That brings us to Elaine's last item, number 6.
This actually was something that was requested by Thanasi at the board meeting. We decided to bring it through the B&G committee. Thanasi asked for a recommendation on whether or not the board could delay collection of overpayments while we have certain litigation items pending, as well as we plan to make a request to the Charter Review Committee to amend the charter to allow the city to, at times, when appropriate, pay a portion of an overpayment. Staff's recommendation, as explained in the staff report, is that we not delay that. The reason for that is that there's uncertainty as to whether or not the city charter amendment will even be passed. If it is passed, it wouldn't even come before the electorate until November of 16. And after that, you would have to go through the process of having the city adopt an ordinance. So we're looking at a year or two out. The litigation is the same issue. There's going to be a long delay before we've resolved any litigation dealing with overpayments. And delaying it presents a danger that we're not in compliance with the EPCR's guidelines, as explained in the staff report, as well as the fact that interest will continue to accrue on those overpayment, and it could cause harm to a member if ultimately it's determined we must collect that overpayment from the member. So with that, staff's recommendation is to maintain the status quo.
Do we have any questions or comments on this? Does not appear so. We have a motion from Tom Sullivan with a second from Ed Katrosser.
Ready to vote?
Motion passes 6-0. And with that, we move on to item 7 on the agenda, which is the staff recommendation to approve Microsoft Enterprise licensing, a Microsoft Enterprise licensing agreement, and David Bond.
Our current enterprise agreement expires in October of 2015. The EA enterprise agreement covers all of our Windows licensing for servers, databases. It's everything. It's all inclusive. I released an RFP and received 6 responses. 5 were similarly priced with bids of equal value. Then you start to look at service. I was thoroughly impressed with PCMG throughout the entire process. They answered my phone calls, returned my emails, which was unfortunately kind of a rarity. So the recommendation is to proceed with PCMG for a term of 3 years and at a cost not to exceed $80,000.
Any questions for David? Okay, the coffee cart is coming around in 10 minutes. Dick Wilkin has made the motion, and I provided the second.
Ready to vote?
And the motion carries 6-0. Thank you, David. With that, we go to item 8. It's a non-action item, staff's review of fiduciary council policy, IT policy, and outside counsel consultant opinions policy. Mr. Tran.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Before you, staff's review of the fiduciary council policy, the information technology policy, and the outside counsel consultant opinions policy. We bring this before you as part of the required triannual review. You have the policies in front of you, and the staff's recommendation is not to make any changes. However, I welcome any comments or suggestions the trustees may have.
Apparently we got this one right.
Yeah, I think they look great.
No comments or questions from the committee members, so let's move on to our next item because we don't have a vote on this. Thank you, Mr. Tran. We're into old business now. Staff's recommendation for proposals to City Charter Review Committee. Elaine Reagan.
Yes, this is the third time I think that the board has looked at this, and the City Charter Review Committee will be addressing SDCERS' request at its August 6th meeting. Therefore, this is the last time the board has an opportunity to provide input. In page 2 of the staff report, I've outlined the additional revisions that the board requested to look at the last meeting. The first one is to revise section 141.2 to add language allowing the city to adopt an ordinance to pay any portion of an overpayment or an underpayment plus associated interest. That would be an ordinance that would not be subject to a 143.1 vote if they adopt this language as is. And then the second part is to add to section 144 language dealing with the experience required to appoint an independent trustee from the legal field, and we've just added the language that says the practice of law related to any of the preceding fields, meaning pension administration, actuarial practice, investment management, real estate, banking, or accounting. I think that ties it in nicely. And then we also added language dealing with the port and the airport's request to be able to run for a seat on the board. So with that, if you have any questions or suggestions, happy to take them. We also provided for you a copy of the cover letter that Mark would sign and send over to the Charter Review Committee.
My only question is whether Mark has had any preliminary discussions with Scott Chadwick or anyone else at the city about any of this, and if so, could we just hear feedback on that?
Just this week.
I think a battleship.
Yeah. So Elaine and I had a conversation with the city CFO and a deputy director of policy in the mayor's office regarding the charter recommendations. And they had a clarification on one, but not a concern. And with the clarification, they were fine with that. The one that they specifically asked about dealt with the overpayment topic and suggested that that's going to be the most difficult one. If the mayor has concerns over that, and likely would not be in support of it, but we'll take it before the council and see what they say.
Just want to say that I thought staff did, Elaine, a real nice job on that portion of it. It was well thought out, good justification, and may not fly, but I think it's an excellent attempt.
It seems to me that that this is an example of good government and how it's supposed to work. Everybody's doing their job the way they're supposed to do it. Ultimately, this isn't going to be our decision, nor should it be. I would concur in Dick's comments and thank staff for carrying this out.
You didn't mention any discussions, Mark, with the city attorney's office.
I have not had any conversations with the city attorney's office, nor do I believe Elaine had any conversations with them.
I have not.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Action requested on this. So we need a button. There we go. Motion's been made by Dick Wilkin, and I have provided the second to approve staff's recommendation for proposals to City Charter Review Committee.
Ready to vote? All votes are in.
And the motion passes 6-0. That brings us to item 2 under old business. Report on overpayments and underpayments exceeding $10,000 from Marcel Rossman.
Good morning. So you have my report. We have one new member who has an underpayment of contributions in excess of $10,000, and we have 2 members who were previously reported to you that have now made arrangements to pay their amounts in full. And I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have.
The payment by Ms. Van Putten in full does not in any way resolve the litigation surrounding her issues, correct? It's just a payment.
Correct.
Does not appear as though there are any questions or comments at this time. Thank you very much, Ms. Rossman. And that brings us to the boardroom high-def upgrades, and back to David Bond.
So what we thought was a bite-sized project has broadened in scope. Our vendor a year ago informed me that we would be able to upgrade our existing cameras from standard def to high def. That option is no longer available, and we're looking at now basically a complete overhaul of the AV system here from standard definition to high definition. And the estimates that I've received are between $120,000 and $180,000. We're just changing the next generation of technology. The city did their high def upgrade last year or 2 years ago, and there are many agencies and cities across the state of California that are going through this process. It's an expensive endeavor. So I wanted to come back to you and give you a couple options, seeing as that the price tag has ballooned. So there are three options that we could go forward with. We could stage the HD upgrade over the course of 2 or more fiscal years. There are things we can do this fiscal year. If you'll notice, the big screen behind you is fading, and we have to address that. So we've got enough money in this year's fiscal budget to deal with the big screen, to make a couple of other HD improvements. But if the board would like to, we could spread the upgrade over a couple of fiscal years to spread the cost out. The other is to issue an RFP and upgrade the entire boardroom all this fiscal year. We'd come back with the proposals, a recommendation, and a new budget. The final recommendation or final option would be to defer the HD upgrade, except the big screen and back, because the big screen and back really does need to be upgraded. It's fading. Just defer the HD upgrade for a future fiscal year, with the presumption that the price of the technology will eventually come down. I'd like to open it up for discussion.
Yeah, just something that I wanted to clarify, or that you could as well, Dave. So if we did part of this, we could upgrade that screen, the screens in front of the dais, and the screen down in front of the board members to a high def format, and that would be high def for anything that is presented from the dais. So PowerPoint presentations or whatever materials are projected on the screen would be in high def. And we could do that for roughly $50,000?
Correct. And we were talking about putting a monitor right in front of the presenter's dais, so that you wouldn't have to crane your neck and turn around and turn your backs to the audience to look at the big screen. There's also a possibility we could put a monitor up front and center, but it might interfere with the camera shots. So we'd have to take a look at the size of a monitor that we could actually put up there and make sure that it was viewable, that the font size was big enough. But we could definitely put something in front of the presenter's dais right here for within the 50,000.
Dave, could you, sorry.
Just one last thing. Then the thing that we would potentially defer would be upgrading the cameras. There's one here and there's 3 back there. That cameras is about 80 or 90 grand. And delaying that would simply mean that the video of each of you, that's what the cameras are there for, is looking at us. That would be standard def until which time we changed it. So it would be high def for any presentation materials that you see, but the video of people shots, which is only visible on the website, would be standard def.
David, is there any reason why we would prefer to commit to a staged 2 or 3 year implementation versus defer and deal with it next year?
Well, that really is option one, is to defer to next year with the hope that this would, the cost of the technology would go down. You could defer multiple years if next year it's determined that the cost didn't go down.
I can envision an annual deferral, like Walter Alston's contract with the LA Dodgers in the old days. But I was wondering if there was any advantage then to having this, actually committing to it, or whether we might, it's really the same thing as saying we'll do what we have to do this year, the big screen, and we'll defer the rest of it.
Essentially,
Talk next year.
Right, and then we would take a look next year at the larger upgrade.
I have a couple of questions. First, one of the things you mentioned is putting a 40-inch screen. That seems small to me, for us being able to read text and so forth. And second question is, the way you put it is if we did everything this year, you would come back with a revised capital budget. You know, my experience is you don't change the budget after you've adopted it. You may go over budget or whatever. And so that a question to Mark would be that we haven't seen how we turned out this year, how we came out, because that report's not before us yet. But typically we've come out under budget.
We will this year. Well,
And I don't remember a year when we haven't come in under budget. And if in fact we are going to be probably under budget because of salary savings or whatever, there may be adequate monies available within that operating budget to go ahead and bite this one off and do it. That would be my preference. I don't see it, unless the technology savings weighting would be significant. I don't see any real advantage to waiting. And I guess a question to you, Dave, would there be some savings in terms of having one coordinated project as opposed to doing something and then waiting and coming back? Are there some savings from going ahead and engineering it all together?
I think there is, beyond the big screen, we can really, I think, contain and isolate the big screen and putting, if a 40-inch monitor isn't large enough, then we could look at a bigger one. That really, the incremental cost between the size of monitors is not that much. The concern would be how high it comes up here and if it would get into the camera shot. So we were thinking 40 is probably about as high as you might get. We would put it on a little riser, but we can always look at the different size of the monitor. But the rest of the project, because it is more than just the cameras, there's television production equipment that's in the back room. There's audio that would then become high def, and that would have to tie into the high def television production equipment. So that piece, the bigger piece beyond replacing just this big screen, is something that we would want to do all at once. Hopefully that answered your question.
I think that what you're saying is that putting that screen, doing this and putting that screen are straightforward, whatever, no savings, but the rest of it needs to be kind of all engineered and done at once.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, that answers my question. I would hope there would be a way we could go ahead and bite the bullet on this.
Andy?
just briefly comment on the
Ed's been
budget
Ed's
question.
been in the queue for a while.
Oh, go ahead, Ed.
Okay.
I would strongly recommend going the RFP route for a number of reasons. Number one, we could lay out the issues. They could come back with some creative solutions they weren't not even thinking of right now. I don't think there's much investment on our time in creating an RFP and going through the process, and I think we can learn some valuable lessons from there. You know, we say that if we wait, the cost may come down, but then some new technology comes out and the cost is back up again, so I don't know that we gain much there. And lastly, Walter Alston actually started out with the Brooklyn Dodgers, just to let you know.
Alan, do you want to yield to Mark, or do you want to?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark, and then I'll jump in.
We will underspend our fiscal 15 expense budget and probably our capital budget too, but that favorable news, of course, doesn't carry forward in fiscal 16. The slate's starting a clean. And in fiscal 16, our capital budget is skinny down from what it has traditionally been in the past. I think we've got some payments that we're making to Sagitech for the pension system and not much else. So there's certainly a likelihood that for fiscal 16, if we were to do the full project, that we would exceed the capital budget. So part of the RFP process would then also be coming back before the board and getting your formal approval to revise the capital budget.
Yeah, a couple things. One, I was happy to hear that it's the degradation of our equipment that's causing it, you having a hard time reading, and not me. So I support, upgrading our monitors here and then one here and then the one behind us, because there's a efficiency there for all of us. In terms of the high definition cameras, I personally don't want to be in high definition and would prefer standard definition, maybe even soft focus. So I don't see a $120,000, $180,000 expenditure just to improve the video and sound quality for the website video. really worth it, quite honestly.
All right. Tom?
What's the lifespan of the next generation, and what's the lifespan of this current equipment?
I'm sorry, Tom, you're out of time.
By the way, this isn't my good side.
This current equipment has been operating since 2010, and it functions. So its lifespan is until there's nobody out there that would repair the equipment, and people are still repairing the equipment. When the camera breaks, we send it out and it gets fixed. The lifespan of high definition, I really, I don't know, Tom. That is the next generation. How long that generation will last is, I suppose, anybody's guess.
The current equipment's only been here for 5 years.
10 years.
10 years. I said it was 2010.
Did I say
Say
20?
2010, but
Oh,
some of it is older than that.
right. We've upgraded the SDCERS system, but the actual AV itself has actually moved here from our old facility at the Wells Fargo Bank. So the AV itself, the hardware, is 10 years old.
And what's our contract in this building? We just redid that.
Yeah, we're through 2023, I think, so we're committed in this building for another 8 years.
I think Ed's idea of an RFP would probably benefit us, especially long-term, having competitors.
Thanks, Tom. Natasha?
I want to agree with Alan on this one. I don't need to see myself in high def either. You all know how I feel about getting filmed, so I support replacing the immediate needs right now, but deferring, I guess, and revisiting it at a later date.
For reasons of personal vanity or?
Exactly.
Conflict of interest.
Just one comment. We talked about the impact on the budget. We would probably depreciate this over 5 years, I would assume. So we're really talking about 1/5 of the impact over 5 years of budget, not hitting the budget all in 1 year.
And that's if it's all, that's regardless of staging. That's from the year that we
Yeah.
put it in.
That's correct. Am I right? It would probably be over 5 years?
Well, yeah, not to make too fine a point on it, but there's a capital budget for the cash flow on capital items, and then there's an expense budget. So capital, we would exceed the capital budget, the cash flow outlay, but we probably would not exceed our expense budget, which would be the depreciation on the equipment. Yeah.
Understood.
All right. That's a good discussion. We don't have any action requested on this at this time, correct?
Correct, and it sounds like we'll need another discussion tomorrow because there's I don't hear a solid consensus as to what we would like to do.
Well, I'm hearing a solid consensus on doing the immediate, which I don't know that you really came here to get, but it sounds like you have. And it seems to me that this committee is probably universally willing to have you go out and do an RFP, but not necessarily universally willing to spend the money in this year's budget or even next year's budget. That would be a further discussion. So I think, based on what I'm hearing, that you could proceed with the RFP and bring that back.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay, will do. All right, thank you.
All right. That brings us up to the status reports, and first, legal services.
Thank you. So as you can see from my very lengthy report, it's been a busy month for legal, busy 2 months. I just want to highlight for you, starting at page 3 of the report under compliance, we did have a few issues that popped up on the tax compliance area in the past couple of months. As part of the conversion to IRIS for the legal module that went live in June, we determined that there were some former spouses who were receiving a community property share payment of the retiree's retirement without having a domestic relations order on file. This would cause the plan to go out of tax compliance because you can't make that payment without having what we call the DRO. So we're working with those former spouses to make sure that we get them in place. IRIS has been programmed to ensure that this doesn't happen again in the future. The way IRIS will work is that if you've got a DRO case in IRIS, it stops payment of the benefit until legal staff has reviewed it and approved it. So that shouldn't happen going forward, and we're working very hard with the ones who are in pay status. We haven't stopped their payments, but we've given them a grace period to get that on file with us and advised them that if they don't get the DRO on file, we'll have to suspend their payments until they do. Beneficiary designations, we did a review of designations in general just to make sure that...
Can I stop you on that one? Assuming hypothetically that you do not have the DRO, are the benefit payments potentially being made to the member but not to the former spouse?
Correct. You withhold the amount that's due to the former spouse, but you can't pay it until you actually get the DRO on file.
And how do you know that there is that amount owed and how much it is without the DRO?
You do, because they've given you notice via the either a joinder or a written notice of adverse interest, and in that notice they tell you what portion they're claiming, and it's usually by the time rule. So you can calculate what their portion is and you withhold that. Beneficiary designations, I've reported to you previously that we had reviewed designations to make sure that designations on file are accurate and unambiguous, and we're working on sending letters out to those that we have defined as being inaccurate in some way. We've also now done a review of all beneficiary designations where a trust is designated as a beneficiary. The IRS has certain regulations on what types of trusts can be designated and certain requirements. And so we've enacted a board rule that requires a member to provide a copy of the trust so we can review that and ensure that it complies. We've determined that there are over 500 members who have designated trust as a beneficiary who have not provided us with a copy of the trust. We've also pulled 200 trust documents from member files that have been provided to us, and legal is going to be going through those and reviewing them. We're going to be sending a letter out to the 500 plus members requesting that they provide us with a copy of their trust document and warning them that unless it's reviewed and approved by legal, their beneficiary designation could be determined void after their death if that trust doesn't comply with the IRS requirements. So we're getting notice out to our members of these requirements.
What's the exposure of the pension fund if payments are made to a trust and the trust turns out to be invalid or subject to challenge?
It's a tax qualification issue. In other words, you haven't
It's
complied.
not a double payment issue, it's a tax qualification issue.
Correct. 1099-R reporting, we've looked into the taxable status of certain components of the disability retirement benefit, particularly an industrial disability retirement. The retirement is made up of various components. For example, surviving spouse annuities, COLA annuity, COLA adjustment, things of that nature. It's not just the basic pension benefit, and these various benefits have different tax implications. We think we're reporting it correctly, but we've worked with ICE Miller, and we're going to be filing a private letter ruling just to get something from the IRS confirming that what we are doing is correct, because it's a bit of a gray area. And then tax withholding, we also identified an issue with the member portal where it was allowing members to select a tax withholding option that's not allowed. And so we're working on fixing the member portal and getting notification out to the members that they need to file a new withholding document. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Elaine. No questions for you on that, so we'll go to David Bond with IT.
In addition to my written report, I wanted to introduce Ray Lawler. I think I individually introduced Ray to everybody. He is relocating from the Washington, D.C. area and will be assuming Blanca's duties. I'd like to recognize Blanca. She's been here since we were over at the Wells Fargo building and has been an excellent resource for us, and we wish her luck. She's moving to Texas, so best of luck to Blanca. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Blanca. Thank you, David. I'm going to skip over member services today. We'll just table that until next week. Oh, member services, Cynthia Queen.
morning, everyone. Thank you for reading my board report. I know that you're thinking that I'm simply trying to prove that the call center team is the best-looking group at all of SDCERS. It's possible, and we'd also like to confirm that we are just fine with high def because we are confident. But truly, I would like to introduce
Considerably younger than the board.
I would like to introduce a sampling
My exception.
of our Natasha, you are correct. But I would like to introduce a sampling of our call center rock stars. I'm very proud to show off some work regarding them today. So first, starting over here, I have the call center supervisor, Antonio Roberti. I have Carmen Bravo, who served as our lead during the first week of open enrollment when Antonio was at Management Academy. I have Brian Redford. I have Sarah Becerra. And I have Patricia Cantrell. And I would like to commend them all for being top producers and for their outstanding work, because we've talked a lot about our call wait times, and this team led our group in achieving a call wait time average for the entire month of June during open enrollment of 13 seconds, which is impressive anyway. Thank you. It would be impressive in general, but as you know, in June with open enrollment, we have a high volume of calls, and in June we received almost 3,000 calls, which is 1,000 more than the average month. So I was just very, very pleased with their work, their professionalism, their ability to learn new tricks on the spot when specific questions would come up, and working together as a team. And I want to point out that the call center, their job is not just to answer the phones. That is one of a number of tasks that they do. As we've tried to move towards technology and are embracing it, we get a number of requests through our website, which is wonderful because members can be more specific, send the question whenever they want. As you know, we have our fabulous contact tickets where we track everything that goes on. And since the inception of IRIS, this team now has the responsibility of creating workflows and approving a number of tasks related to tax withholdings, direct deposits, address changes, a number of items that were previously not handled by them. So their jobs have changed and increased, and they've done such a wonderful job. So I really appreciate and have always shared with the team the interest you have had and the emphasis that you have placed on the importance of keeping our customer service at a very high level and keeping the wait times down. And so I was looking forward to this day when I could bring this fine group of colleagues down here and just take a moment to personally recognize them. There's more folks upstairs on the phones, of course, because we would never do anything to leave our members unattended, and including the health staff, which Mia will talk further about, who, of course, are a great part of this. So I was going to move on, but did you have a question, Alan?
I just wanted to thank you as well. As an elected member, I deal with our fellow employees every day. The call center is really where the rubber meets the road at SDCERS in terms of our interaction with our members. And it's that first impression, usually positive, but occasionally negative. And unfortunately, I think sometimes in the members' call, they expect you to be the CEO, the CFO, the general counsel, the board, and everything all rolled into one and have all those answers immediately available. And sometimes if they don't get those answers, they get frustrated. I can tell you, I understand how hard that could be, because sometimes it's expected of me, being an elected member, to have all those same answers too. So thank you for basically being on the front lines with us with our membership, because I understand how hard that can be, and I hope you don't take some of the stuff home with you. Sometimes our members aren't necessarily friendly on the phone. So thank you.
I think Patricia, Sarah, Brian, and Carmen know that the real CEO is Antonio.
That is correct. Just a couple more quick comments, and thank you so much for that. In order to accomplish this for June, in addition to training and preparation and a great deal of teamwork, we did focus additional staff on the phones because we knew that we would have a high level of phone calls. So we have made a number of improvements over the past year, but during this time I do want to emphasize that we did place extra staff in order to keep on these wait times, and I'm looking forward to see how they continue throughout these months, as we do have some other things that we need to focus on, but we were all quite excited and energized by this accomplishment. Now I wanted to touch on one other point that Mr. Hoy had specifically asked about during our last meeting. We had talked about when you look at the average wait time, what is that longest wait time that can skew those numbers and make them go up? And in June, interestingly, we did a lot of research on this and found that we did have a longest phone call in June of 18 minutes, which is extremely long in my opinion. It goes to Ed's point that he was
Very
asking
short
about
for
before.
Cox Cable, but it's long for us.
So with that said, Antonio researched this, and that happened on, without going into the depths of this that I love, it was on a Monday where we had 2 staff members out, and it happened around that noon time where it's difficult for us, where we're rotating staff through, even though, of course, we do coordinate the breaks. And I want to point that out with the opposite end of the spectrum, where on a day on July 11th, the longest wait time for anybody that day was 34 seconds. The average that day was 5 seconds. So in essence, throughout June, they were just rocking it. They were doing such a great job, but we had 1 or 2 days at some certain busy period of the day when, that pulls your wait times. But we continue to just focus on this, and when you focus on anything, it always gets better, and I learned that from a wise man named Mark Hovey. So with that, I would like to move over now to the next piece of this, and I would like specifically to commend Jessica Packard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to compliment Jessica Packard, our communications manager, who did such an excellent job of the mailing that made open enrollment work out so well, and incorporating information regarding our retiree associations, and was just an excellent addition to our team. And I would, of course, like to give a very special congratulations and thank you to my wonderful colleague, Mia Alamar, for her excellent work on open enrollment, and she's now going to share some further details.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Just to let you know, open enrollment was very successful, and I just want to thank the call center as well as the health team for all the hard work and dedication that you did during the month of June. It could be pretty rough. There are many aspects that we have in open enrollment that hasn't changed, but there's one addition that we had this year. We recently offered to a new SHARP plan sponsored by the MEA to offer and provide auto deductions for those who would like to enroll into this new plan. The health team, along with our IRIS guru, Michelle Wegner, have been working very hard to implement the functionality that needs to go into IRIS, as well as test this functionality. So we've been working very hard to make sure that this process of enrolling these new members for this new plan is seamless. Also, for our Help Day, it was a huge hit at the Balboa Park Club ballroom, and our health team did a tremendous job in addressing questions and concerns for over 400 retirees in a matter of 2 hours. So that is a big accomplishment. We didn't even have the opportunity to look up or get water or anything, but we were able to address those in a timely manner. Also, to follow up with the last board meeting regarding statistics for our retiree health plans. For those retirees that have enrolled in a city-sponsored plan versus those who are being reimbursed, 86% are at the city-sponsored plan and 14 are being reimbursed. In addition, this number can be skewed if you include reimbursements that are provided for COBRA members as well as our Medicare Part B. That concludes my report. Did you have any questions for?
Let me just thank both of you for the Help Day. I've gone to these as a retiree every year since I've retired, and every year they've gotten a little bit better and a little bit better organized, and this was no exception. They had place mapped out. Everybody, all the vendors knew exactly where they were going to go, and had better presentations, and were good. As an aside, I was talking to a representative from the SHARP plan, and the MEA offering of SHARP came a little bit later than the others, the normal city offerings. And I was talking to somebody from the group, and I just said, well, did you realize that SHARP Health Plan was going to be offered up to retirees? And he said, no. And I said, what did you think about that? And he said, well, if we'd have known that earlier in the game, we would have sharpened our pencil or provided additional offerings. And so it just demonstrates the value of having additional competitive forces working in the process, and I think it's a good, healthy sign. But I do want to thank you for your support of the retiree groups. organizations and allowing literature to be included within the packets, which certainly helps membership, and for the excellent organization and running of the Help Day. Got a lot of good feedback from retirees about how well organized it was, so thank you.
Thank you. And just in regard to the MEA plan, we did have about 51 retirees who did enroll into that plan, and we expect probably that it will increase throughout the years.
And really quick clarification, Dick is referring to the comments from the HealthNet team, who is a main competitor, you would assume, with Sharp.
All for competition.
Okay.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
With that, we move to Benefits Administration. Marcel Rossman.
I've done that today. At least I've done both hits. I'm going to be bruised evenly. Good morning again. You have my report. There are two main things in it. One is Marcy Catechus, who'd been with us a little over 21 years, retired, so we wished her well, and we're able to absorb that based on our planning, knowing that it was coming up, and efficiencies that we have incurred in our division because of the IRIS implementation. Second, our DRO integration went live. Everybody's talked a little bit about it, but we were really happy. It was extensive testing and a long road to get there. Went well, went in successfully on June 15th, and is being used by staff. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Reagan.
My microphone. I was deficient during my report in not mentioning also that my team, consisting of Johnny, who's now left the room, Teresa, Lynette, Jamar, and Michelle Wagner did an excellent job on the DRO implementation. It went live seamlessly. I don't think we've had any problems whatsoever with it since it went live. So kudos to the team.
Thank you. And thank you, Marcel.
I've mentioned this before, but one of the benefits of the IRIS system is that it turned a lot of the work that we did into a workflow where things are electronically moving from person to person to make things happen. And it's forcing my staff in a good way to work more closely together than they ever have before. So DROs would have been done by legal before and then separately handed off to Ben Admin, and now those two divisions are working much more closely together. So it's really positive, I think, in terms of the chemistry that it's building with staff members. So a good benefit of the IRIS system.
So the last three items on our status reports are all Ted LaSalvia's. Go ahead.
I feel like I'm sitting on the floor here.
You look like it.
So the last three items, I'm going to save the finance staff report for last. So if we can just go directly to the financial statements, you should have before you both April and May. I'm going to focus on the latest set of financial statements. In dealing with our balance sheet, we have net position once again of about $6.8 million. This is an increase of $210 million year over year. Investments total $6.8 billion, an increase of $288 million over the prior year. In looking at the income statement, the statement of changes in plan net position, we have total additions of $488 million for the 11 months. Total benefit payments of $424 million. This resulted in an increase in net position of $64 million. So when I present this information to you, I'll give you a little context. When I last presented the financial information, I presented March, we were in a net loss position of $21 million at that time, so we have slightly improved for the 11-month period. But this $64 million is compared to an increase of $813 million in the prior year. And once again, investment income is the largest change. The schedule of reserves as of May 31st reflects the composition and net position for the payment of benefits. As of May 31st, total reserves are $5.7 billion. This is an increase of $163 million over the prior year. And with that, I will open the floor to any questions on the financial information. With respect to the finance staff report, as noted, finance is current with its financial reporting obligations through May 31st. We're currently in the close process for the June 30th fiscal year end. On May the 13th, SDCERS was notified by the GFOA that we were awarded the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for our June 30th, 2014 CAFR, so I was really happy to get that one out of the way, especially with all the numerous GASB changes. In addition, also at the end of May, we implemented a major upgrade to our accounting system, Microsoft Dynamics, which included the implementation of a new financial statement reporting tool. Lastly, we're preparing for our year-end audit, which begins on Monday. Both finance and other divisions are busy providing documentation for the interim, we call them a PBC list, so the auditors have information to actually focus on. In addition, we're going to continue to focus on more analysis-related activities. You've noticed from other report outs that there have been numerous changes in the organization through the implementation of the IRS system. Sometimes for finance it's a little bit like drinking from a fire hose, but we've learned quite a bit about the intricacies of the actual transactions that occur in other divisions. So on one side we have the major processing of a tremendous amount of transactional work. But at the same time, we've also now implemented more analysis of those specific transactions, and I kind of want to drive home that point, that IRS has enabled us to do so more efficiently than we ever could have under the old pension gold system. And with that, I'll open the floor to any questions.
Just curious, do we have any idea of the CAFRs filed, what percentage received the Certificate of Excellence?
That I do not know. There's like no national database that I've been able to see with who's been awarded and who hasn't.
I would suspect it's not very big.
We could certainly find out from.
Maybe you could look
I
into
could
that,
check with the
Ed.
GFOA to see if there are statistics.
The one thing that I would also like to comment on from the GFOA's point of view, and you can fill in the blanks here if I miss it, when they give us the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting, they also issue what my old CPA days used to be called review notes on the CAFR. So they would comment on things that either didn't measure up to standards or that should be changed prospectively going forward, or nice to haves. And the letter this year I think was extremely clean. Did they have anything, not in detail, but I think it was very clean.
Yeah, no significant notes, and that's kind of what I strive for in the preparation of the CAFR.
Yeah.
No, it's a real achievement, and I'd like to put it in context because I suspect the number is not very high. Curious.
All right. So Ted, maybe next report you could tell us if you find anything out about
Absolutely.
what the percentage is. Or
Will do.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 4 on the agenda, questions and comments from chair, trustees, and staff. Anyone have anything? All right, then we'll move on to non-docket items, also blank. And I think we're ready to adjourn. Meeting's adjourned.
Meeting.